Welcome to the Next Level Human podcast. As a human, you have a job to do. In fact, you have 4 jobs: to earn and manage money, to attain and maintain health and fitness, to build and sustain personal relationships, to find meaning and make a difference. None of these jobs are taught in school, and that is what this podcast is designed to do: to educate us all on living our most fulfilled lives through the mastery of these 4 jobs. I'm your host, Dr. Jade and I believe we are here living this life for 3 reasons, and 3 reasons only: to learn, to teach, and to love. In this podcast, I will be learning, teaching, and loving right along with you. I'm grateful to have your company. Here's to our next level. All right, everybody, welcome to the show. Very excited for today's show. I'm here with Stephanie Wang, who is the creator of, I have to say, my favorite product that I have seen probably in the last decade, Stephanie. And I want to kind of cue this up to introduce Stephanie to all of you. Obviously, this is the Next Level Human podcast. And Stephanie is one of these people who has, through her own sort of journey, decided to create something for the world that is incredibly powerful. It's funny because I first got in touch with her because she has this product, which you're going to learn about here in a minute. And I was like, oh, I wanted to just ask her some questions as a fellow entrepreneur, because I was thinking of developing this particular product. And she was incredibly gracious and sent me some of her product. And then I took the product and I was like, I'm not going to create my own product. This is the best thing I've ever, like, how could I do better than this? And so now we're sort of here. So Stephanie, this product is Kanna. It is something that a lot of people do not know about. You have been, now sought after as an expert in this because you created this for the world. And of course, you're not the first Kanna product. I would just say you're the best Kanna product out there, in my opinion. And what I want to know is help us understand what kind of got you started on this journey. What is Kanna? How did you get on this journey? And a little bit about your next level human journey, because we were talking before we got on, you and me, and I was talking about the idea that there's nothing more powerful in my mind than someone who goes through something, learns something, struggles through something, and then decides, you know what, the world needs this, and I'm going to be the one to bring it to them. And we were also talking about how people don't realize that entrepreneurs and being an entrepreneur is incredibly, incredibly difficult. You put a lot of skin on the line, a lot of love in it, and you don't know how the world is going to receive it. And so, first of all, my gratitude. Thanks for being on the show, and help us understand your journey with this incredible product.
Well, first of all, Dr. J, thank you for having me on the show. It's a great honor. And thank you for also acknowledging the path of an entrepreneur. Definitely. I mean, I actually consider it a spiritual path because you actually are confronted every day with your fears, and you have to grow. You either grow in the process or you just kind of just say, no, this is not for me. And that's okay. It's not, entrepreneurship is not for everyone. Having said that, what you said was absolutely true in terms of going through a journey, especially with creating this kind of product, which is something that certainly from my heart, it's been my greatest intention to bring something to the world that can really help people. Mm-hmm. And how did this all start? Well, the seed of Kanna Pathogenics, which is my company, began about 10 years ago. I had my very first plant ceremony, and that was not with psychedelics at all. It was actually with Kanna. And at the time, I had gone through, my whole life, there had been quite a few traumatic events, and, which I don't need to get into because, like you said, I think all of us, in one way or another, are all on a journey, and going through difficulty and challenges is something that is part of life. And how we meet those challenges and how we heal and grow from them is what brings, the great meaning, right? And so during that time, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And I went into the ceremony, and it was done in a very sort of South American shamanic way. But it was with Kanna, this plant that until then I'd not heard of. And Kanna is a succulent from South Africa that has been revered as a sacred plant by the native Khoikhoi and San tribes of Southern Africa, and has been, used medicinally and societally and spiritually by um, the Khoikhoi and the San for millennia. And what I experienced during the ceremony was a connection to the most profound feeling of love that I had ever felt in my life. And that journey maybe lasted 5 hours, 6 hours. But, the feeling of it, and it's very hard unless you have your own experience with Kanna in ceremony. It really expansive. You feel this complete interconnectedness of all things. And you also come to this inner knowing that what coheres this universe is love. What connects all of us, what we are each of us made of, is actually love. And I know that may sound a little bit like corny, but it is totally true. And this is a wordless knowing and understanding. And when you can grasp that in your core, you really come to a feeling of belonging and deep meaning as to what living this life means. And you start to not just be able to see things differently and see your own patterns and kind of go, oh, wait a minute, I was so obsessed with this one thing, when actually it's not that important. Or, oh my God, I can totally forgive myself and somebody else for something that happened years ago or just now. So there's this tremendous sort of accelerated moment during the ceremony, which I had, accelerating process, I should say. And that stayed with me for a long time. And I kind of kept working with Kanna personally for 10 years. And about 4 years ago, I was like, this is so incredible. I need to bring this to more people in an accessible way, not just in ceremony, because not everybody can do that. And how can we actually integrate this sense of belonging, of joy, of happiness, of understanding, and kind of heart-centered wisdom into our daily lives? And that's when I really got deep into the science of it. And it was equally fascinating, right? Because I actually started on the more consciousness side of things, and then went into a personal development way, and then went into the scientific aspects. And Kanna is a natural serotonin reuptake inhibitor. So it prevents the reabsorption of serotonin in the brain and in the body. And what's interesting is that it's also a serotonin releasing agent, where actually majority, you could say, of its action is more as an SRA, as a serotonin releasing agent. And that way, it actually really, allows the prevalence of more serotonin in your body. And it acts very differently than, let's say, a chemical SSRI. Plus, it's non-addictive. There's no tolerance buildup, and that's very unusual. What's also interesting is that it activates various neuroreceptors, and not just one type, which a lot of other substances and plants generally target sort of one set or one type of neuroreceptor. Kanna actually activates receptors for cholecystokinin, for melatonin, for GABA, and for opioids, just to name a few. So that means it helps actually control hedonic cravings, and hedonic hunger and thirst. It also helps improve sleep quality, especially if you take it regularly. It then, with the GABA and the opioids, it's basically calming your brain activity and also giving you this sort of feel-good factor. So on those levels, it's fascinating. And on top of that, it inhibits an enzyme called PDE4, which allows our bodies to actually resource more energy so that you can sustain your stamina. And also the inhibition of PDE4 as well improves cognition and helps make Kanna very neuroprotective. And so you have this amazing plant that is neuroprotective. It is an empathogen because it's heart opening and opens yourself to more emotional, provides you more emotional openness, or has you access more emotional openness. It also helps lower social anxiety. It helps calm you. It helps reduce stress and anxiety. So there's all of these amazing aspects, including improving cognition and stamina. So it's really a fascinating plant. That the more that we have been working with it to not just develop our products, but just to study it, has always been revealing more and more to us in the process.
Yeah, yeah. It's I have to say I have been incredibly impressed on everything that it does. And just to add a few things, just in case the practitioners among you want to know the mechanism. So MAOA is the gene that it's sort of impacting, that is making it sort of a serotonin releasing agent. Also all the monoamines. So that's dopamine, that's serotonin. Um, GABA as well, as you mentioned. So it's like sort of the serotonin, dopamine, GABA sort of a thing. It also lowers glucocorticoid production. So for people who are stressed, I see it as one of the most fascinating adaptogens that I've ever
Yes.
studied. And a lot of people may not, they might go, well, that's interesting, because we typically think of things like ashwagandha or rhodiola or things like that as adaptogens, which certainly can do that. But to me, this has way more scope in terms of mechanism of action of any adaptogen that I've studied. And this part that you allude to, Stephanie, which I think is a part of the thing that I think is so amazing about what you've done here, is that, we today feel, and I think everyone would agree to this. There's a social angst across the world, especially
Mhm.
in the West, that is making people feel alone, like they're not accepted, like they don't belong, like they need to battle. There's this constant thinking in dualities and binaries. I'm right, you're wrong. I'm left, you're right. All these extremes that I feel like something like Kanna, and it sounds like this was part of your idea. Something like Kanna begins to help us see the spiritual truth, which is we are indeed all connected. And one of the things I'll say about this, and then I want to get your thoughts on it, is that one of
Mhm.
the reasons I immediately reacted to your product so favorably is that I've tried Kanna products before, and they're nice. They're certainly nice, but sometimes you're like, I don't know that I feel anything. So maybe it's healthy, maybe it's not. There's something immediately about this product, even the way you formulated it, in the way it sort of tingles in your mouth, that you feel an uplift almost immediately. And I was telling Stephanie, and I'll share this with all of you, but the other thing that was really profound for me, and one of the reasons I got into Kanna anyway, is what you mentioned about hedonic eating, because obviously a lot of what I do is in the weight loss world. And I was like, the mechanisms of action here, you know, cortisol mechanisms of action, the anti-inflammatory, effects, the dopamine, serotonin effects. This has to have a positive benefit. I hadn't felt that with any of the other Kanna products until I had yours. And I also say one more thing here that's really interesting. I'm Italian. I love my wine. I can overdo it a little bit. And one of the things I've been doing, which is really interesting, is when I'm going out socially, which I do a lot, and I'm trying to reduce my alcohol intake, I will take the Kanna, your
Mhm.
product. And it's amazing because it's better than alcohol in terms of opening me up and just helping me connect to people, but I'm not actually doing the alcohol. So I would agree, it's an incredible product in all of its mechanisms of action. And so here's the thing that I want to know: how did you initially see this? Because as entrepreneurs, you know how this is, Stephanie. You put a product out, and there's certain things that you're like, yeah, that's exactly what I had hoped, and other things are very surprising, and in terms of what people are saying. So what's the feedback you're getting? What is the things that you're most excited about with this product? What are your sort of thoughts now that it's out into the world? And also, did you see what, you didn't, this was done just before the pandemic. And
Mhm.
so this was a product that was needed, I think, and is needed post pandemic. So I'm just wondering all your thoughts on sort of looking back now,
Yeah.
what has surprised you? What are the things that you're most excited about?
Wow. That is a lot to address, and I'll do
Mhm.
it one by one. First
Yeah.
of all, I do want to say that the intentionality behind the product is, and you can feel it when you're actually ingesting it. Um, the intentionality is absolutely there. And honestly, the biggest reason I wanted to bring this to the market and create this company is to help people reconnect to their heart-centeredness. This is really I would say, our core intelligence. We have a ton of intelligence in our mind and our brain, but without this heart-mind connection, we go astray. We get too much in our heads, and you can already see in the world what that's done for us, right? Because if we lack empathy and compassion and and forgetting how we are interconnected, we start to do things that harm each other without even knowing, right? Because we're not conscious enough. And so I would say the biggest reason for bringing this product is to, hopefully inspire and help people reconnect to that in themselves. Half of the time when you ask someone, hey, how are you doing? How are you feeling? They're like, oh, I think I'm okay. Like they always go to the head, right? Or they go to some automatic answer. But if you really ask someone how they feel, it's often very hard for people to even connect to how they feel, because so many people are disassociated from their own feelings. That is the first step of healing. It's like, wait a minute, let's just stop trying to get something outside to try to fix us. What is going on in here? Because we, as human beings, have so much inherent intelligence in our bodies. And I think that's one huge aspect that I really, I think a lot of people can resonate with, but I really want to emphasize. And Kanna and Ka are here to help with that, right? And in terms of why, and thank you so much for your very kind words of what you're saying about our products and our offering. We so appreciate that. And there's a reason why you actually feel it more, because of the way that we formulate it. It's a patented formulation, first of all, and we did not use any heat to degrade any of the plant ingredients. And the ingredients don't just include Kanna, they also include snow lotus, acmella, snow lotus, acmella, lavender, and mint. And I'm not, let me say this again, that all of these actually work together, synergistically. And because we didn't use any heat in the production process, nor did we use any elastomers or sugars, none of the bioactivity is damaged, right? So what you're taking into your body is, and we're talking about the Kanna chews right now. When you take the chews into your body, you're actually ingesting something that's alive, right? And so
you feel it too.
You feel it. It's very, very different. And we also specifically didn't want to use any sugars for obvious reasons, but also to make it as pH neutral as we could. And so it's diabetic friendly, it's keto friendly, and we didn't even use any elastomers. The craziest thing is we did not use any preservatives. I really, if you try and find something out there that doesn't even have citric acid or any kind of preservative, I don't think you'll find that. I challenge anyone to find that, because I would like to know that research.
Yeah.
We took many years to come to create this, with, and actually have it taste good on top of all of this. And that was really, really, really difficult. But that's the kind of clean offering we wanted to give to the world.
Yeah, it's it speaks to Stephanie, kind of this thing. Like, as a naturopathic physician, among my colleagues, there's always been this argument of like, what are we doing to the plants when we process the plants to such a degree? And so my reaction was, there's no way I could do better than this. It comes from a lot of seeing that. I was like, how did they do this in this way? It almost feels as if you're literally going to the plant, and picking it and then chewing it the way the Koi San, did. It feels like genuine plant matter. It also is incredibly, it's funny that it does have a sweet taste, so it blew me away when I looked immediately. It's like, oh, but there's no sugar in this. And so you're just getting all these natural, sort of compounds in there. And I want to say something in regards to what you talked about, with this heart-centered feeling, because a lot of my work now, as the psychology part of what I do, what a lot of people don't know is the heart has its own nervous system, and it's in constant communication with the brain. This is all research. The Heart Math Institute is doing a lot of this research. A lot of people are not necessarily aware of this. And one of the things that I would say, and I'm interested in your take on this, is that there's not many things that we can do in our society that get us out of our logical mind and get us into our feeling sense. And part of the reason we don't want to look at our feeling sense is there's a lot of wounds there, and we're afraid that we're going to pick at those scabs and that they're going to start bleeding again, and so that we then avoid them. One of the things that I have seen with Kanna, and we'll talk a little bit about the difference between Kanna and psychedelics, because I think people will get that confused. It's not a psychedelic, but it has a similar sort of way of allowing you distance between your struggles. And you alluded to this earlier, where it's like these things have happened to me, and or I've done things I'm not proud of. And we can, as humans, push those things down. We'll blame, complain, whimper, whine, distract, deny. Sometimes at our worst, we'll attack as a result of that. And what I've found with these compounds, and especially Kanna, which is really interesting, is it allows you distance between these wounds and these betrayals and these needs for apologies and all this stuff that no one talks about, and gives you some distance to see your patterns and to look at it in the context of your individual journey. In my mind, we're here for three reasons: to learn, to teach, and to love. And we don't have a whole lot of compounds that allow us to actually get into the feeling sense without being overwhelmed by the feeling sense. And it, to me, Kanna seems to be a guardian of that in a sense. It's like a plant that allows you to say, okay, Stephanie, okay, Jade, we're going to go and look now at these wounds. You're going to feel connected. You're going to feel loved. You're going to feel this sort of euphoric sense. And though, we're going to allow you to look at these difficult things. And in a sense, from that perspective, it frees you. And I'm wondering, how is this the initial call that you had when you did that ceremony? And then I want to talk a little bit about ceremonial setting versus what you've done, which is daily use. But talk to me a little bit about that ceremonial. Is that what happened, and what did you confront? And then you said you did a bunch of work with this herb in the last 10 years before you brought it, and perhaps it was helping you sort of take those struggles and completely integrate them.
Absolutely. Kanna is so interesting because it's psychoactive, but not psychedelic. Mm-hmm. And it's also great for integration. But before I even get to that, in terms of ceremony and how it gives you that space, it really, what it's doing is it's actually helping you or allowing you to hold space for yourself, right? We talk about holding space. What does it mean? Usually it's someone else holding space for you. But no, this is actually a beautiful sacred plant that is a teaching plant that is helping you to hold space for yourself in love. So you're looking at your patterns, but it's in a very loving, gentle way. And that's how Kanna works. It's not sort of hit you over the head, let me beat you up kind of way. What it's doing is it's kind of saying, it's okay. It's okay to let go. It's okay to feel the feels. And often, because you were asking earlier about some of the greatest stories testimonials that I've been hearing from people who've been trying the product, is, oftentimes what will happen is it's not all just like, ooh, let's, joy and happiness. Sometimes the floodgates open and all of what was stuck gets moved. We had actually, it was a guy who let us know that he was like, oh my God, I love your product. This is the best thing ever. And then I was expecting him to tell me something like, it made me feel so good. And he said, oh my God, I cried all night. I couldn't stop crying. It was the best thing ever. I so needed that. I so needed to release these emotions and connect to what it was that I was repressing. And it was incredibly healing for him. So that was one. Mm-hmm. Another beautiful story is, and this is more on sort of, somebody who had a lot of issues with anxiety and insomnia. So this was a woman who was going through menopause. And because of that, she couldn't sleep. She had, even more anxiety than normal. And she was taking a pharmaceutical just to help with that. And when she discovered Ka, she just said, you know what, I'm going to try this. She stopped taking the pharmaceutical, and it was so much better, than the Xanax. I'll just say it, right? And I'm not saying everyone is a little different. I just want to be very clear. If you're on any sort of prescription medications, absolutely talk to your physician before you switch to something else, because especially with SSRIs, benzodiazepines as well, but especially with SSRIs, for both, you just have to be really careful how you come off them. So that's just something to take note of. One of the other stories, we had was someone who had a lot of chronic pain. And she wasn't even thinking, oh, I'm going to take, she was like, okay, I'm taking Ka because I love to work out and it's helping me work out a lot better. Like I'm stronger, I can go a little longer. But the unexpected result, because she actually took this continually for like a month, was that her chronic pain just went away. And this was, she wasn't intentionally doing that, but this, because of, again, Kanna has analgesic and an anti-inflammatory and also immunomodulatory properties, that also went away for her. Another person said, she was having a lot of conflict with a friend, and they could not sort of come together. But they were, like, no, but she really wanted to, because this friendship meant a lot. And so she suggested that they share some Kanna together, Kanna chews. And when they did, they were actually able to really speak from the heart and listen to each other and allow whatever needed to happen. And it basically helped them process and resolve this conflict. And we got a beautiful testimonial from this as well. So this was something that, I maybe did not anticipate, but it's kind of the type of reaction and response we've been getting from the public.
Yeah, and one thing I'll say for those of you listening to Stephanie and I's conversation right now, one of the things that I think all of us have been very interested, I'm sure you have too, Stephanie, we've all been interested in the psychedelics. One of the things that Stephanie was alluding to, though, is these psychedelics can be pretty harsh. They really can kind of knock you over the head. And I do think people are right to be a little bit cautious and a little bit afraid of, some of these things. Kanna is not that at all, which makes it so, and plus it's legal. So, one of the things that's really beautiful about it is not something that's going to hit you over the head that way. It's incredibly gentle in what it does. And a lot of people might say, well, it sounds like it does everything. It's starting to sound like snake oil, kind of that snake oil salesman kind of thing. But if you look at the metabolism, really the seat of the metabolism is in the brain. And anytime you can do anything to reduce stress and also, amplify brain chemistry and reduce inflammation and all those things, you're going to see global effects. And that's partly what you are seeing here. But I have a theory, and I want to see how you kind of look at this. So, we talk about consciousness a lot, right? And there's two schools of thought, and this is just going to be an interesting, maybe philosophical discussion, because I've listened to several of your interviews, and you're incredibly smart and insightful and wise. And so I thought maybe you'd have a thought on this. But, so there's materialism, which for people who don't know, materialism is this idea that, the brain creates consciousness. It's just, once the nervous system bundles, they're so complex, it eventually poof, consciousness happens. And maybe that's the way it works. But there's an alternative hypothesis, which is idealism, which is just to say that everything is consciousness, including us. We're just an extension of this universal mind in a sense. And our brains are really more like a filter for consciousness, not the creator of consciousness. And and I tend to be more of an idealist in my philosophy. And I tend to think of some of these compounds, herbs in particular, and things like Kanna as almost opening up that filter. It's almost like, let's say, the old radios where you had to turn the dial. So let's say Stephanie's like 107 FM and Jade is 102, FM. And maybe some of you listeners are like, 94 AM, right? So we have our little frequency that we're picking up consciousness. And then all of a sudden you take something like Kanna and your consciousness just expands, opens up in a way that now you have access to a range of consciousness, and your perception begins to be altered. You begin to see things differently. And I do think that shift, what we don't know is that, and you alluded to this, Stephanie, that shift, our bodies are electric and energetic in a sense too. We so the idea that emotions only come from the head, they are associated with, these energy centers in our body. And so also the body's perception and ability to open up and, be a greater filter for consciousness comes in, which allows for healing, which then explains some of the things that people will do. Like this guy who, had this cry and this release that then sent him on sort of a healing path. I've seen that kind of thing over and over and over in my patients over the years. And I never could quite describe it, but I do think it has to do with this sort of filter for consciousness. So I'm wondering just what your thoughts are on that at all. I mean, it's a very Taoist sort of philosophy in a sense. I would say Taoism is a non-dualistic, sort of idealist philosophy. But I'm wondering just what your thoughts are on that, and how you see something like Kanna sort of fit in. Sort of a philosophical question for you.
Well, thank you for asking that question because it's a great question, first of all. And it dovetails nicely into psychedelics, non-psychedelic. How does this
Hmm.
compound work? Kanna is a, how should I say, a non-psychedelic entheogen. So it does shift your consciousness. And what it's doing, I think, on a very basic level, right? Because it's actually when we're stressed and sort of in flight or fight, right? Our serotonin levels, that depletes our serotonin levels, period. Which then affects our sleep, affects how we operate, right? On a day-to-day level. And if there is more serotonin in your brain, it's literally opening up that perception, right? Because if you're fight or flight, you're just focused. You're just like, oh my God, this tiger is going to eat me, or my boss is going to fire me. And you're just focused at like a pinpoint. You cannot see anything else because all you care about is survival in that moment. What Kanna does, because of the mechanisms and how it works in the body, it actually opens that up. So you start to see more, start to work more creatively. You
Hmm.
start to problem solve more easily. You start to see alternatives to things that you did not see before. So in that sense, as a filter, you're absolutely right. Like normally you're going about our day, but when we are sort of assisted by these plant allies, and Khan is certainly one of them, we're able to open that up. We're able to perceive not just wider, but more deeply. We're able to perceive, how should I say, multidimensionally, and especially emotionally. And we start to kind of have more navigational ability um, in our interior landscape,
Yeah.
which, of course, as above, so below, whatever we end up doing in our behavioral patterns comes from subconscious beliefs and subconscious ways of that we've been programmed, right? So when we start to kind of access through feelings, in particular, because we're talking about this um, empathogen, which is Kanna, it's a very interesting pathway, right? And what's also from a ceremonial level or from a shamanic level, Kanna is considered heart medicine. Whereas, let's say psilocybin or ayahuasca, right, which are some popular plant-based psychedelics, are considered spirit medicine. So it brings you into consciousness through spirit out of body. Whereas Kanna helps you stay in your body and you're kind of coming to consciousness and up leveling through the heart in your body. And that's very, very different. And that's why, to your point about integration, that's why Kanna is so great for integration on a daily basis, whatever is happening in your life. And it helps you kind of process and integrate beautifully. And it's also great for integration post ceremony. Let's say you've just had a mind blowing journey and you're just like, whoa, you're coming out of it. Not only does Kanna help replenish the serotonin that you just may have, gotten a little bit drained of, it also helps you integrate everything that just has come up for you, right? Because there's a lot that usually comes up during these plant ceremonies, during these journeys. So over time, it really helps you and assists you to do that. And again, what's great about Kanna is that it is not habit forming and it's safe to take on a daily basis. And that is something that is so anathema. Like, people don't think about, ooh, what do you mean? I can dose myself every day and it's okay. And it's in fact helpful and neuroprotective. And that's why Kanna is so special, because of exactly this, which most people don't know about.
I'm sorry to break into the show, but I wanted to take a second to cover one of our sponsors and tell you all about Paleo Valley at paleovalley.com. These are the grass-fed sticks that I tell you all so much about, that all of my friends know I have on hand constantly. They are in my car. They are at my house. I keep them at my sister's home and my parents' house. I have these things everywhere because they are the simplest, most convenient whole foods protein supplement you can get. Almost like carrying around pure protein, low carb protein in your pocket. They also, these Paleo Valley beef sticks, are the only 100% grass-fed and grass-finished beef sticks on the market. They use organic spices. They are naturally fermented instead of using nitrates and nitrites that can be a problem in some of these cured meats. And they simply taste fantastic. Check out the original or the jalapeno. Those are my favorites. Please make sure you go over to paleovalley.com and visit. When checking out, use the code Next Level for a 15% discount. Remember, our sponsors keep the show going by you giving them your patronage and spending your money on these high quality products. You actually do a few things. One, you're helping to support the podcast. And two, you are helping your health. And three, you are making sure that good quality companies like Paleo Valley can be out there doing their business, changing the world, making the earth better. One of the things you may not know about this is that grass-fed organic and grass-finished beef is doing something that is so utterly important for our environment, actually helping to repopulate the topsoil. A lot of people don't know this, but our topsoil is being extremely depleted. And raising animals, especially cattle, the correct way helps to get that topsoil back. This is one of the reasons why I love Paleo Valley. Not to mention it tastes fantastic, but they're one of these companies, like my other sponsors, Cured Nutrition and Organifi, that are doing the right things by the environment. I really appreciate everything they do, and I hope you will check them out. Thanks so much. PaleoValley.com. Use the code NEXTLEVEL. And now back to the show. Yeah, that's so well said. And just for the listener, if you're a little bit confused by the term empathogen, it's just basically a compound that makes you feel warmth and benevolence for others, and also allows you to accept and feel that you are connected and belong. So you accept yourself and you're connected and you belong, which is a thing that we, I think, desperately need in our culture. And, to me, one of the things that I like about this is you talked about the grounding effect of it. Like normally, if you're going to take a psychedelic, right, like you said, I love your distinction of spirit medicine versus heart medicine. You're out there, you're not really in your body. Whereas Kanna really brings you, it's not one of these things that, feels like you're out there at all. You feel very grounded. But also incredibly conscious, a lateral thinker, ability to expand your awareness, be in tune with your feelings in a way that is very different. And, of course, in my work, the metabolism work, part of the reason I even got into this space that we're talking about now is that psychology, I realized early on, you can't divorce psychology from physiology. They are absolutely the same. And so we're entering into the physiology through our psychology with this particular herb. You can do the same thing with exercise, for example, as a way to enter into the psychology through our physiology. But I love the way that you talked about using this, just in the integration practices. And I also love the way you talked about this in terms of, friends, and connection. It really is one of those things, which brings me to something. And you and I talked about this. I hate these kind of comparisons. I know you get this all the time, but a lot of people, Stephanie's going to roll her eyes at me, but, so a lot of people compare this to MDMA and that feeling, which to me, I've done MDMA and therapy. They're very different in feeling. MDMA does sort of have a little bit more of an out there type of feel in ceremony. Kanna does not, to me, feel exactly like that. But I guess some of the mechanisms of action make people compare this, which I don't think it's a good comparison. But I think that everyone's going to ask you about that again and again because of some of the mechanisms of action. But there are some potential concerns with MDMA in terms of perhaps neurotoxicity and stuff that does not exist with Kanna. But that's something that I know comes up, and that you, Stephanie, and me will probably answer this question every single time you talk about Kanna. For anyone who knows a little bit, they're going to bring that up. They're definitely going to bring that up.
Absolutely. I mean, that's why it's an FAQ on our site. There are, I will say that sort of heart expanded feeling is similar to MDMA. But MDMA, first of all, is synthetic. Kanna is not. It's organic. It's a plant. It's been used for thousands of years by the indigenous of Southern Africa. And also, like you mentioned, it's really not advisable to take MDMA every day or consistently because it will damage your nervous system.
And you feel the come down on that, where there is no come down on Kanna. Kanna is like one of these things where there's not only is there not a come down, it almost feels like there's just a buildup. It's like it almost feels like it's reinforcing you in some really powerful way.
It is. We like to say, first of all, Kanna unplugs you from the matrix. That's how
That's a great way to say it. Yeah.
and that it resets your brain. So, you know, we've done this in the past where we do a little 30-day journey with, you know, we're like, hey, who wants to join us for a 30-day journey? And then we bring in integration coaches and stuff like that. Because this is another plant that isn't, it's like, it's a gift that keeps on giving. And yes, you can do it ceremonially, but if you kind of microdose it every day, you will see the powerful effects. It is subtle, but it is very powerful
Mm-hmm.
in the sense of there are certain things I can tell you personally, right? Having done that 30-day and then maybe stop a few weeks and then done it again consistently, I take it very regularly, is that I've noticed that certain patterns in me that were not positive, like let's say, like I was super impatient and I kind of lose my temper
That's
easily.
the entrepreneur in you, Stephanie.
All right. I just get so grouchy, right?
Yeah.
And I've noticed that, you know, even when I'm not taking it now, I have been able to maintain a certain level of calm.
Mm.
And that's what's beautiful about Kanna. It's real medicine. It's actually really healing you and it's actually helping you. And so that's very, very different, certainly from MDMA or anything else out there. And again, chemically, so, so different. One will really damage your nervous system. The other is very neuroprotective. Plus, there's other risks. And again, I don't want to take away from MDMA assisted therapy because I know that works for a lot of people. But it's just, you just need to be conscious of what the downside is, right? What the negative effects are. And so, you know, people, I don't know, hypothermia, um, some other negative effects as well from MDMA.
Yeah, and people who have mood disorders, you got to be very careful because it
Yeah.
can be incredibly depleting to the
Mhm.
neurotransmitter system. You got people can really crash after MDMA. Let's talk a little bit about how to take this now. So you mentioned there's several, and I know you have a couple different products. You know, so you have a tincture basically that you take, you know, droppers. I've been using the chews almost every day. I'm a little bit bigger, so for me, I started with one. I actually do two now, pretty much in the morning.
Mhm.
And you know, so you could tell me if I'm doing this right. Me and Stephanie have gone back and forth on email a few times where she's been educating me a little bit because what's interesting about your background, very few people who bring herbs have the experience of, you know, the indigenous sort of experience that you've had. Like, you know, you kind of understand how this is used indigenously. You have people on your staff who are, you know, high-end scientists. So, you know, you're kind of into the art and science of this, where a lot of people are either they're the art side, you know, and they don't really get the science, or they're the science side and they don't understand how it's been traditionally used. What I like about you, Stephanie, is you're kind of both. You understand the art, the traditional uses, and you're deep into the science of it. So let's talk a little bit about how this would be used. Let's talk first about if someone did want to use something like this in a ceremonial sense, what does that even mean? And how does that work? Because it's very different than you know, sort of the daily use, which we'll talk about after.
Sure. I think before I get into that, it's important to share some of the contraindications.
Yeah,
Because if you're already taking SSRIs, MAOIs, SNRIs, or any kind of CNS depressant, this is not advisable for you to do.
hundred
Don't take
percent.
that unless, you know, we have to get into that as a separate case. But generally, it's a no. And so let's say ceremonial dose. Is that what you're asking?
Well, yeah, and just how that would work. You know, you know, yes, the dosage and, you know, sort of how that would even work. Is this something you would say, sure, you could, hey Jade, you can go and do this by yourself one day and set aside some time, put on some healing music, put on an eye mask, go deep into the experience, or is this something that's like, you know, you really should have a, you know, a shaman type person there, and yes, and what doses would you use? You and I kind of talked about this
Yeah.
by email, but a lot of people who are into it's I don't even know that it's you may even say it's really not the most appropriate way to talk about Kanna, but I know a lot of people who are into the psychedelics, you
Mhm.
know, use Kanna, you know, in addition to or separate from. And certainly I like the idea, part of what I've been interested in, and I haven't done this yet, but I've shared this with Stephanie on email. I really want to. I've done all the psychedelics in ceremonial setting. I absolutely love Kanna. I just haven't done a very high dose yet in a more traditional, let me go deep and see what this herb can teach me kind of thing. And even if that's appropriate, you know, and you being the expert, I'm just curious how you see it. And do the Khoi and San even do this in their traditional cultures?
Thank you for asking that. And by the way, you're just making my day because just everything you said, that's exactly what we want to do. We want to bring the science and the wisdom traditions, right, of the indigenous and also the spiritual tradition as well. So there's all of that that's wrapped in here. And it's important because that's
Mm.
actually how, if you want to get the most out of whatever you're doing for your health and sort of whole health in your life, that's kind of how you have to approach it. You have to look at all of these aspects, right? So, on a ceremonial level, I can tell you that the way that I initially did the ceremony with that, when I met Kanna, was done in a very South American shamanic way. So it was interesting because it was actually a South African plant in a
In the
more
South American, yeah.
traditional with a Peruvian shaman,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so I was like, okay, but he's indigenous, and he was bringing this because he has this whole kind of pharmacopoeia of all different plants from all over the world, and so my experience sitting with Kanna in ceremony was like very much how a lot of other ceremonies are conducted. So we first share an intention, which by the way is super important because
Mhm.
when you share an intention or you have an intention before you ingest something, it basically is making you more mindful, right? Because otherwise you're just shoving stuff in your mouth. And you have to respect that this is a sacred plant, and you don't have to, but it is definitely recommended, um, highly recommended that you do that because this is a living being, right? And when you set an intention, what you're doing is also coming into relationship with something. So there's a big difference between mindless consumption versus mindful relationship, and a big difference between extraction and being transactional in something versus being mindful with a relationship that you're building. So it's the same approach to plant medicine, right? And so with Kanna, you set an intention, and usually it's in a group. So each of us shares that intention, and we share it with a group because as the journey starts, we will start to see how each of our intentions starts to weave together. And in our interactions, we will actually discover some amazing insight, usually, or you'll find answers from somebody else asking you or just telling you something that is totally not related to maybe something that you were talking about, but then kind of um, inspires you or gives you much deeper insight into whatever that you were looking for an answer for, right? So we weave this container. We're not allowed to leave, right? We're just being, we're observing and respecting the space and each other. And we go in, right? So we kind of first usually go deep into ourselves, have that space for ourselves, listening. There's music playing, there's very calming music playing. And yeah, and we kind of drop into that feeling. It usually starts happening, that drop in starts, oh my God, it could start as quickly as 15 minutes or as long, it depends on the form that you're taking it
Mm.
in. And then in about half an hour, 45 minutes, you're really in it. And in this process, at least in the setting that I was in, you could sit by yourself and nobody will bother you if you say, hey, don't bother me. Or you can kind of come into um, a group setting where you can chat and do whatever. So that happens. And let's say 5 or 6 hours later, you can feel the medicine kind of waning. People usually then grab some food. And then the next morning is when the facilitator or the shaman will do an integration session. And that
Mm.
is super, super important because that is really allowing each person to share what their experience was. And when each of us hears the other person's experience, that also infuses into our experience. And again, it's not complete without this process of sharing, right?
Yeah.
Because that is communicating a lot of what's happened. You're speaking what has happened to you, you're getting guidance, you're sharing with each other, you're building connection. And at the end of the day, plant medicine, honestly, I believe the greatest purpose of plant medicine is to build community because it starts to take away all of these artificial masks that we wear on a day-to-day basis. It brings us back to our humanity. And I think ceremony is, people don't necessarily talk about this, but ceremony is actually a great way to kind of dismantle a lot of these. um, a lot of this infrastructure that we have in place to be and to exist in our world, and allows us finally the freedom just to be ourselves, right? And that's hugely healing. And to be able to share our feelings, that is not something that, I mean, it sounds simple, but it's not something that most people can even do, let alone with strangers, right?
Yeah.
So that is ceremony in itself. The indigenous and how they did it was a little bit different. I actually, what I do know is that they would take Kanna and ceremonial doses and go into a trance, and they would dance, and they would essentially divine, sort of talk to God, talk to their um, um, their divine being, and also talk to their ancestors. So it was a way to commune again with the greater divine existence of life, and also your antecedents, right?
Mm.
And so this is still about connection, though. There's a theme that runs around this. And this is the beautiful thing that you also were talking about, that is what Kanna brings, is this realization of interconnection and just connection in general. Just
Yeah.
allows us to connect more readily with each other, which is absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, I love that so much. Like it dissolves the illusion of
Yeah,
separateness in a
right.
sense, it seems like, which
Absolutely.
to me, all spiritual teachings, right? They essentially come back down to the idea that we are all one, we are all connected. And maybe the matrix is the idea that we think we are separate, and
Mhm.
sort, quote, what I would call source consciousness. It seems like these plant medicines are connecting you back to this. And one thing I'll just say for the listener, because I'm sure some people who might be like, so is this getting you high? For me, the feeling of like the little heavier doses, is I wouldn't call it being high. I would call it being expanded and grounded at the same time. It
Mhm.
doesn't feel like what most people would think, and of course I haven't done the very high dose ceremonial piece, but what about sort of the daily piece then? Because then that would be considered, what I'm currently doing with Kanna, and finding, one of the major findings that I'm finding is that the eating that I typically do at night, my Italian, desire to eat everything in sight from 5 o'clock to 11 p.m. is essentially dissipated. But that's and I do about one or two. Sometimes I do it in the morning, sometimes I do it right around 3 o'clock, and it's in lieu of just relaxing for sort of the night. And how do you do sort of the daily dose, and what do you recommend? And of course, I'm a big guy, so I'm 225 pounds, so I'm obviously, I feel like maybe I need a little bit bigger dose, maybe not, but it does depend. Sometimes I've noticed, Stephanie, if I've eaten something versus I've not, and
Mhm.
or just context. Like sometimes it just really hits in a way that's like, oh, that's interesting, that
Mhm.
today it was a little bit more powerful. It always seems to give me something a little
A little bit
different,
different,
but
right?
predictable enough. Yeah, but predictable enough not to
Yeah.
cause any anxiety around it. Just seems like pushes you in just the right way.
That's absolutely true. You are different. Each of us are different every day. So if we're engaging with something else that's alive, it's always going to be a little bit different,
Mm-hmm.
right? Well, this is the difference between plants and pharmaceuticals, right?
Yep.
Pharmaceuticals are designed to give you okay, it's always the same thing. Not to poo-poo pharmaceuticals, because we certainly need them under certain settings. There's a place for all of it. But on a daily basis, this is what I do. I take one Kanna chew. We have two products. We have the Kanna chews and the Kanna tincture. I'll take the Kanna chew in the morning, first thing before breakfast, before anything. It just helps set the tone for me. So I'm a super busy, stressed out entrepreneur. And, when I take that in the morning, the chews for me last all day. So I don't get into this overwhelmed feeling, which I used to do a lot because I just see all of this stuff coming at me. And now I just kind of go, oh, okay, well, okay, I can do this first, and then this, and then this, and then, okay, it's all good. Let's say it's 6, 7 hours now, and I'm about to go out, and I'm kind of tired, and I'm going to go out with someone. I'm meeting my friends. I'll bring the tincture with me, actually, because the tincture, being a sublingual liquid, it absorbs more quickly, and it will kind of hit you quicker, right? So I'll bring it out. I'll dose my friends if they're into it. You can also put it into water or a drink, and that will still be effective. That won't affect the efficacy. And it's lovely, like you said, to take instead of alcohol. And in
Hmm.
fact, in South Africa, in Afrikaans, it's called one dry drink. So they
Mm.
actually take Kanna as one dry drink. So it's like, if you don't want to take alcohol, take this. And it's actually used in South Africa to treat alcoholism and to treat
Yeah.
addiction. So
Yeah, I
it's
knew that
it
part.
all
It's
used
really neat.
so neat, like all of
Yeah.
these different aspects. And so that's like the tincture for me is the re-up, right?
Mhm.
Now, I have also like, I mean, I encourage people to try because everybody's different, right? Like you said. And for some, they are diehard tincture people. They're like, don't give me anything. I just want the tincture, and that's all I want, and that's all I'm going to do all day. I'm like, great, right? But there are ways to work with them both, like I said. Um, in terms of dosage, it really depends, and it doesn't depend on body mass,
Mm.
actually. I know someone who's maybe a little bit um, less in weight than you are,
Mm.
Dr. Jade, but for him, at this point, it's like a quarter is enough because he's
Yeah,
been taking it
interesting. Yeah.
regularly,
Yeah.
right? It's so interesting. And so it really depends. And for some people, they do need more.
Mm.
And I will say, if someone has been, let's say, taking amphetamine salts like Adderall or something for in the past, they don't even have to be taking it now. Their initial dose will need to be higher.
Yeah.
That's just how it is, right? And also, what's super interesting is that serotonin actually first helps lower inflammation in the body. So sometimes, if we have a lot of inflammation, that the Kanna might first be doing that, which is great for you anyway, before you start to feel that uplift. So every person is different. And, I will also say that what are some of the negative effects that some people have been that do have, right? Nausea
Mm.
sometimes, but usually that's only initially for a little bit of time. Sometimes people have an upset stomach. Sometimes people get headaches. But majority of people don't have these issues, but again, it all depends on your own genetics as well. There's no
Yeah.
one size fits all.
And one thing I'll say about the digestive stuff, just as a naturopathic doctor, because we do a lot of gut restoration stuff, you'll oftentimes see as the gut heals that the digestive system heals, which kind of has a lot of implications for that in terms of its mechanisms of action. You will see sometimes on the way to gut restoration programs, you will see some nausea, you will see a little bit of digestive upset when you do gut restoration programs. So it wouldn't be surprising to me that some people might see that. It's part of the healing process for the digestive system. So it wouldn't be surprising for me to see something that seems to be so good for the gut to be able to do that. So okay, so let's wrap up in terms of final thoughts here. So we've kind of covered the biochemistry of this. I really love, Stephanie, that we covered, and I know that as I've listened to your interviews, you and I definitely vibe in our philosophical worldviews, and I'm really glad that we covered that because I agree with you. This is the Next Level Human podcast. Your next level human journey, mine. It's part of the reason that we are, sort of in a really powerful place in terms of meeting each other. That's what happens, in terms of when you're chasing your purpose and building things, you come, together with like-minded people. So we talked a lot about this idea that Kanna may be one of these, adaptogenic, sort of psychoactive, healing herbs for our time, and that helping all of us, kind of rise to our next level human selves, which really is going to require that we look at our struggles a different way. And I really love that you and I covered that because there's a part of me that thinks that might be the most important element of this. We can talk about the biochemistry and all those amazing things, but this is doing something I think much more powerful than that. And I'm glad that we got a chance to talk about that, and then just the different ways to take it. Sort of higher dose in a more ceremonial way, and then the way that you recommend taking it, which is sort of this daily dose. Which I am now doing as well. But is there anything else that you want to say, want to make sure that we cover, that you want to leave the listener with, just to understand about what you've created here and this amazing herb that's part of it?
Yeah, and thank you for saying everything that you're saying, Dr. J. That's what you're saying is so so true. Let me address a couple of things. First of all, that in terms of its use, like in terms of the product and how to use it, some other ways, I just shared my way,
Mm.
but really, it's for any moment. Like if you're feeling like, oh my God, you're waning at about 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon and you want to like grab a snack, don't grab that snack. Take a Kanna chew. It'll give you that energy and that
Yes,
lift,
such good
right?
advice.
For intimacy, if you want to connect with your partner more deeply, have that open-hearted connection. It makes everything else so much more beautiful. That's another use case, right? Before you work out, before you do body work, like yoga, anything that requires you to kind of center, like meditation, it's great because it calms the monkey mind and it brings you into your body and goes boom, right? It's great if you are wanting a creative boost because of all the reasons we explained earlier. And there is this how shall I say this? You will get messages, I swear. You will get ideas coming out of nowhere. Um, for a lot of people that happens. And yeah, and just before you're doing a big presentation, you really need to focus, or you need to like focus on a project that you need to finish. This is super helpful cognitively for memory, for problem solving, for they've actually done studies about this and people taking Kanna and doing better on brain teasers and math, as an example. So those are some of the ways. I'm just sharing that because I want to really let people know that this is something that they can easily incorporate into their daily lives.
Yeah, lots of use cases.
So many, but the very important point I think it's great to end with is what you just talked about, which is about being this next level human, right? This is the podcast. And I truly believe that Kanna is coming to the world in a it's been around forever, of course, but it's coming now really into the mainstream for a reason. Post-pandemic, there's more, I mean, we've always been sort of having the separation crisis, right? But post-pandemic, it's even worse. During the pandemic, certainly. But this feeling of isolation and loneliness, it's traumatized us, right? And continues to. We're seeing the extremism happen in the world, all these controversies. It's making us, in some ways, I think it's designed that way to make us feel more fragmented. And, this is a beautiful plant coming in to be our allies in making us remember who we are, right? And the powerful, empowered beings that we truly are. And so I definitely think it's coming into the world, during this time for a very specific reason, for exactly that reason. And, I would say especially because we're in this age of AI, algorithms, everything is digitized, everything is social media. It's an artificial connection a lot of times. When we become disassociated from what makes us human in the first place, that's when diseases, these feelings of dislocation, separation, loneliness, that's how all of that happens. And if we can really reconnect to who we are, that is so much more powerful. And I think it's so important because, again, with the technological trends and where we're heading as a society, this is even more important to remind ourselves of.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree more. And I just want to thank you so much for your work. And by the way, everybody, so kaempathogenics.com is the
Or
website.
ohmyka.com. Actually, it's easier to remember.
Oh my ka.
OMYKA.com.
Okay, ohmyka.com. I love that. And just so all of you know, a part of what I'm doing, I told you I wanted to create a Kanna product. Stephanie did it better than I ever could imagine doing it. So I really am going to be pushing this product and making this something that I am really putting my heart and soul into as well to help Stephanie get the word out and use this particular product. And so you'll be hearing a lot more about this product for me. When you go to the website, if you use DR Jade in the coupon code, right, Stephanie, that
That's
will
right.
get you.
DRJADE.
Yeah, DRJADE is my code when you go to ohmyka.com. And you can get, a taste of what this is going to do for you. I'm incredibly excited for all of you to get this medicine. I think it's going to be incredibly powerful. You'll be hearing a lot more about it from me. And, you're you have a IG
Yes.
as well, right? So
Yeah.
that's what
Our Instagram handle is ka.empathogenics.
So
And
ka.empathogenics, at ka.empathogenics on
same
Instagram.
Facebook.
Yeah. And you'll see they're doing some education there, and you're going to hear a lot about this from me as well. Stephanie, first of all, thank you so much for your time. And second of all, thank you, so much gratitude for someone like you who has done the work. I know how hard this is to bring something like this to the world. And thank you for struggling for all of us. So appreciate you.
Oh my goodness. Thank you. Thank you for this beautiful podcast, for you, beautiful human being, and for doing all the amazing work that you do. And, it was such an honor to be on your show. And just so the listeners know, the code DRJADE, Dr. Jade, you will also receive, that's the discount code. So it's 10% off.
So yeah, you get 10% off with that code DRJADE. Thank you so much. And Stephanie, just hang on the line just so I can make sure this all uploads. And we'll see you all at the next show. Appreciate you. You have been listening to the Next Level Human podcast with Dr. Jade Teta. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure you subscribe and consider leaving a review. You make the biggest difference when you pass on your lessons and inspire others. That's why reviews like this are so powerful. Your words may be the only ones that resonate for someone else. Please remember the information in this podcast is for educational purposes only. Always consult your personal physician or therapist before making any lifestyle changes. And finally, thank you for who you are in the world and the difference you make.